yesterday's stream we had some technical issues, which is why we had to restart it. So for those of you that are on Twitch and there was a restart, thanks for staying with us whilst we sorted that out. I think it's because of the way that we did the stream yesterday and it caused issues and the like. So today we are talking about all kinds of things. Now, yesterday's stream, if you missed it, you can catch it on my YouTube channel or head on over to Kaora's Twitch channel. That's twitch.tv/Kaora. And you can find the stream that we did yesterday, which is basically when we started world building. Let me move over here. So, oh, my eyes look awfully red. No, they're okay. Don't know why they look so red. Anyway, we did a stream yesterday where we basically started making a map and we were just hanging out and chilling on a Saturday afternoon or Saturday evening, depending on where you are. And so, yes, it was a lot of fun and we're going to be doing it again next weekend. So bear that in mind. Now, this weekend, a lot happened last weekend. There's a reason why I didn't have a show last weekend, and I'm going to bring you up to speed on that as to the reason why, and some really cool stuff that has happened as a result of that. So there we are. And Daniel Frick, glad that you joined us on YouTube. So great. Good to have you as part of this group. Lots of fun had by all. I could see the chat busy scrolling up, over here, but on the screen in front of me. All right, so let's get into this whole lot. Now, there's a very serious message which has come through, and I have to read it out in public because I think that it is my duty to do so. And if I fail to do so, I don't think that would make me a very good person. So you're going to have to forgive me. It's written on text. It was sent to me. It was sent to the channel, I should say, and then the Web Goblin sent it on to me because he said he thinks we should do this. So, right now, this is something that we have to do, and I tried to memorize it, but I just couldn't. So, I'm hoping that somebody is watching, and if not, that they will be able to find this particular clip. So, I don't know. Can you clip stuff on Twitter or on Twitch? I think you can. Anyway, so. And I have to do this in my very best voice. So, I want you instead to cast your minds out into the wide open ocean, where we might be standing upon the deck of a ship as it slowly rolls from side to side, with the waves gently slapping at the wooden deck. And there's a message that's been received, and I shall read out this here message for all of you to hear. And it reads thusly, and thusly does it read. To Captain Irion Diniac. I can't wait to sail the seven seas with you for all eternity. Your ever-loving wench, Emma Surrender. Kiss, kiss, kiss. It's a strange message to send in a bottle, isn't it? But nonetheless, whoever you are, Captain Diniac, I wish you and your loving wench all the best as you set sail together. It's got me right here. It really does. It makes me so happy. Oh, dearie, dearie, dearie. Pirate drama indeed. So we got this message. It was a lovely little message. And it was written by Emma to her soon-to-be husband, Mr. Clipson. And she said that they're having a pirate wedding at the end of March. Well, I can't think of anything better than a pirate wedding at the end of March. So why not? Except I'll be in Japan at the end of March, and that's why I'm reading it out early. So there you go. So we wish you, Captain, and your wench fair seas. Anyway, so that was a lovely little request that went out. And we said, well, why not? Why not, indeed? And so there we are. Okay, so we are going to be answering your questions tonight. So, yes, congratulations to them. And hell yeah, best of luck to the seafaring lovelies. So it says Sammy Crit Fiddle and Dragon Soul 13. So, yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Right. So we can move on. Oh, there's World Anvil. Hello, World Anvil. Greetings and salutations, joining us on Twitch. Now, a whole bunch of stuff to talk about. Whilst World Anvil's here, as a matter of fact, we can talk about World Anvil for a little bit. So, World Anvil, if you use the code GREATGM, you get a subscription, a substantial discount off of a subscription, 20% off as a matter of fact, if you sign up for a Journeyman or a Sage subscription to not Sage, Journeyman or a Masters subscription to World Anvil, and you can put all your world in that space. It's a wonderful space, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, you haven't watched this channel enough, so I suggest you go and have a look. So GreatGM gets you that wonderful code off. Thank you for reminding me about that. Okay, so we will be, it's Master or Grandmaster, sorry, yes, that's right, Master or Grandmaster. There we go. I have to commit these things to memory. I really must. Anyway, so that's why we're there. And yes, we've got a lot to talk about. We've got some questions, so ask me questions. Usually questions are flying in by now. If you do have a question, please put the word question in caps lock in front of that so that I can see it popping up on the messages behind me, so it's nice and clear and I can see what's going on. So last week, I went to the Bristol convention, a lovely little convention, a very nice little convention, held in Bristol, oddly enough. I mean, you know, Bristol convention, you would have thought that possibly they could have held it somewhere else. Anyway, it was a lovely convention to go to, and there were lots of very interesting people, and I had the wonderful opportunity of talking with people and playing a role, D&D session. I ran a session whilst I was there, and I'll talk about that a little bit more if you want me to. It was quite a lot of fun. Because we got up to wonderful, cool things, which I think was really exciting. Anyway, so there we are. Whilst I was there, I also met a couple of people who are movers and shakers here in the UK and internationally, for that matter. They will go all over the place, and they gave me some cool stuff to talk about, and so I'm going to talk about that throughout the course of today's show. We've got some interesting things coming up next week in terms of products that have been sent through to me to review and to sort of look at from a sponsor perspective. So bear that in mind as well. There's some questions that are coming through. Let's answer them. World Anvil says, question, what's the next streamed campaign you're GMing? I'm getting great GM withdrawal. Yeah, well, World Anvil, I've been thinking about that. I've been really toying with that idea. And timing is such a critical element. So I have started thinking about a new show, but it's not going to be live streamed. It will be pre-recorded and then released on a weekly basis so that we can consume those as we so choose. We don't sort of have to worry about missing the stream or not missing the stream. And that's just I don't want to say it's a filler, but I would really like it to run for a very long time. So we're slowly putting together people. It's difficult to get a 5-hour block commitment from people, but that's kind of what we need to do in order to bring this idea of mine to life. I promise you it's a lot more complex than normal. I'm not saying anything, Laura. I'm not saying anything, and I'm going to keep stum on that one until we're ready to move forward there. So yes, we will be doing a campaign of some sorts. Will it be live? No, it won't be. Not yet. Anyway, there are options for the future. XX Valentine XX says, how do you feel about companions for your players? Companions, absolutely. I love companions, NPCs that can be there. There are multiple types of NPCs, in my opinion. You've got the mentor, the support, the sidekick, the motivator, the driver, all kinds of different types of NPCs. And as companions, the companions can fulfill one or two of those roles. So I really like companions for player characters, as long as they don't shine and are not better than the actual characters themselves. That's a critical thing to do, because they're an NPC and they're GM controlled. They can have, to an extent, an unfair advantage over the players' characters. So we should avoid that kind of thing by making sure that they are balanced quite nicely and don't overshadow the players. Otherwise, why are the players playing in the first place? Todd Apotamus says, any tips on your players being part of a guild and leveling up in the ranks? Rewards, yes. A long time ago, I put together kind of like a reputation system whereby if you did right by the guild, you earned points towards the guild. If you did wrongly by the guild, you lost points. So you could sort of maneuver up and down. And the critical thing to bear in mind is if the players take an interest, then it's worth developing. But if the players don't take any interest, if they don't really care what their standing is, don't stress over it, because, well, they don't care and they're not going to exercise anything along those lines. And you might just have to run off and create all these different things, and you've done it for nothing because they're not interested. If they are interested, however, if the players go, okay, right, we really want to get into this guild and we want to ultimately end up running it, the best option I would suggest is to look at the notion that we need to understand the way in which the guild operates. Is it a central command? Is it a single entity? Is it a democratic sort of space? Is it a regulated space? Is it more dictatorship? And what do the members at the upper ranks have to do? Because that's something that we often forget. As players gain levels and they gain prestige within the guild and they kind of have a little bit more power and they can control other guild members. But what do they actually have to do in order to maintain that space? What do they have to do to maintain that rank? So oftentimes I will assign and say, okay, well, if they go off and do a mission for the guild, the amount of standing they get within the guild goes up by 1. And if they don't do missions for the guild, and if the guild asks them to do stuff and they refuse to do it, or they don't get around to doing it, it's -1 or 2 or 3 or 4, depending on how important it was. Once they get to the upper echelon, they're then going to pose a threat to the leadership. They might be more popular. They might be doing things that the rest of the guildies really like. What is the leadership going to do about that? If it's a dictatorship, they're going to try and squash them. I need you to go on a quest for the guild. It involves going into a volcano. Very dangerous, but I'm sure you'll handle it. Oh, the volcano blew up and killed them all. What a pity. Well, I'm still in charge. So then you start to look at those kind of things. So it can be a lot of fun. It can be really a lot of fun. But you must make sure that players want to do it in the first place. Lance Pickett says, your thoughts on the possibility of a party setting off the next post-magical apocalypse campaign if they don't get a clean enough kill on the big bad endgame? Well, it's definitely something to think about. And again, it goes back to, do you think your players want that to happen or not? When your players are fighting your big bad endgame and they defeat the big bad endgame, there should be a satisfactory conclusion and resolution. It should feel as if they have achieved a successful outcome, right? If that outcome then causes an apocalypse to happen and it feels bad, then the players kind of feel like they failed, and so it really diminishes that end conclusion. And you don't want that. You want it to spawn a new campaign in this now post-apocalyptic setting. So again, it's an interesting leading question that you ask, because in my last long-running campaign, which was The Adventures of the Windswift, the characters brought about the end of this very, very diabolic plan on behalf of the dragons to reclaim the world that they had supposedly left. In doing so, the characters caused a huge amount of political disruption and damage and alteration, and just there was chaos. None of that, however, was really played up too much in the end. In the end, it was this great question. It was this great conclusion. If we were to go back to that world, would it be fun to go back to moments after that event has happened? And we see now that political fallout, we see the catastrophe, we see the disaster and the success. Or would it be better to come back in, say, 5 years' time, once the dust has kind of settled and we're starting to see the new space that is created as a result? I think it's better to come back later, because then we're still in the same familiar space where the players had fun playing in. We're still in your campaign world or my campaign world or whatever they are. They still have an opportunity to go in and say, oh, I remember this city. Oh, it's changed since we were last here. Oh, yes, I do remember we may have caused the entire city to be destroyed when we accidentally did X. But now it's later on, so we can start to see it as being rebuilt or that it's become a legend. So there's opportunities for us to mitigate the sense of destruction and defeat. I think that's the important thing. Wow, questions coming through fast. So if I don't answer your question in time, as you can see, it just spins past here. If I don't, just ask it again. There's no such thing as spamming on this channel. G Master says, how do I stop my PC from metagaming if I play in the Forgotten Realms? Yeah, well, this is actually what we were talking about yesterday on the other stream, is the problem when you start playing in pre-generated worlds that are commercially available, or worlds that your players have played in before, is that metagame where you go, well, I know that that's a thing, and this is a thing, and that's a thing. There are two ways to combat it. One, which is perhaps a better way because everyone's learning, is when the person says something, is to say, metagaming, your character doesn't know that. Ignore that fact. And then they will check themselves the next time they're about to say something. Yes, they will probably still use it inside, internally, in terms of keeping their character alive, but they need to express it in a character perspective. And it's nothing wrong saying, your character's a barbarian who can't read. How would you possibly know about that ancient riddle's answer? Give me a logical excuse as to how you know it, and then I'll accept it. Oh, your great-grandmother was sitting around the campfire one day telling you these ancient stories of the curious West, and there happened to be this riddle? Sure. I think the chances of that are 1 in 10,000. Roll that and let's see. Now, whilst that player's rolling it and learning their lesson, you get on with the story. That's an extreme way, of course. The other way of doing it is to reskin stuff. So, yes, you come across this creature. It doesn't live under the bridge, it lives on top of the bridge. It's not green, it's bright pink, and it has 6 arms and this weird white sticky stuff leaking from its ears. It attacks you. So the player can't then go, oh, it's a troll, because the player's going, but that's not what trolls are like in this world, so I don't know what it is. So you can cover up some of that sort of stuff. But I think the best option is always just to say, I don't think your character would know that. How does your character know that? Give me a reason, because otherwise it's metagaming, and that's not what we do at the table. But you do have to let your players know that you don't tolerate metagaming beforehand. So that session 0 stuff is like saying, no metagaming. Or if you are going to metagame, because ultimately people are going to metagame, but if you are going to metagame, you need to cover it in player character information and knowledge. Give me something along those lines. Give me something to work with. So that's important, I think. Tropico Boy says, how should I adapt my campaign plans to what the players have done? You adapt your campaign plans to what the players have done, depending on what particular plans you're changing. You adapt it based on what the goal is of the person that has to adapt stuff. So if your goal is, I have a mad priest, and the mad priest is going to take over the world by collecting 10 holy artifacts, and the players happen to steal artifact number 3 and then take it and throw it into the bottom of the ocean, what is that cleric going to do? Does the cleric have to do anything? Yes, they have to go and get that artifact. How are they going to get that artifact? Perhaps they're going to send seductive succubi into the party's mix to try and figure out where they threw that particular relic, and then send an expedition to go and retrieve it from the bottom of the lake. Alternatively, if the cleric has to collect 10 artifacts and the players don't get any of the artifacts, the cleric doesn't have to change anything. You then say, well, what's the next step for the cleric? Well, once he's got all 10 artifacts, he needs to round up 100 individuals who are all born with a birthmark that's in the shape of a 4-leaf clover. And so that's the next part of your campaign, and so that's what the players will now stumble across, and they come to a village. Oh, our daughter was stolen. We're very sad about that, because she had a very nice birthmark on her leg. It was in the shape of a 4-leaf clover. Now she's gone, and so now we need to send somebody else to fetch water from the river. You can throw it in however you like. The idea is that you only change your campaign if the characters interfere with it in such a way that actually precipitates a change. That would be my suggestion. Powwow Leo Kid says, what do you think about paladins losing their religiousness and anathema in 5th edition and becoming more invested in oaths? So, paladins losing their religious faith, I suppose is the right word. Paladins losing their faith and either changing gods or fighting against their own god. Those are wonderful, wonderful, wonderful stories that you can follow and that you can pursue. It should be pointed out, however, and I think that this is your responsibility as the GM, if you've got a new player, for example, or a player who's never played a paladin before, is to have somebody, a mentor character, an old priest, an old paladin, ride up and say, looks like you've lost your faith. Bearing in mind, our goddess is particularly vindictive about paladins who lose their faith. Perhaps we should go on a quest to refind it or rekindle it. Let them know that there might be consequences, but when you give them consequences, make sure that those consequences are offset with some kind of, I don't want to say benefit, but if the mage is an evoker mage and suddenly they go, I don't want to do evoking anymore, I want to do necromancy, they don't lose their evocation spells and things. They don't get punished for changing gears, changing tact. So think about how and what would happen to a paladin. When you have gods who are active in the world, granting powers to people, they might be vying for those paladins, especially if the paladin was quite good. If the paladin is at a high enough level, gods might appear and say, I believe you're looking for a change. Well, have you heard of me? Because I can help you, help me, help you to become even more powerful. You can play around with those ideas. Certainly the old-fashioned ideas in Dungeons and Dragons was that the moment you stopped doing what you had sworn to do to your god, you lost your powers almost straight up, and then you had to go on these quests to retone and atone, I should say, for having done that. Those could be fun, but at the same time they could also just be very painful. Okay. There's still lots of questions coming through. They're wonderful. I think we're going to take a little break from questions, as a matter of fact. I do hope this is set up to the right screen. I want to talk about now a little thing that I made at in the Bristol Gaming Convention, because I think it's quite fun. And this is their flyer. I'll hold that up for you. That's their flyer. It almost looks like you can see through it because it's got a little bit of green on it. And this is their dice box, which they release. And it's a rather interesting. It contains 2 sets of dice. That's all it is. It's 2 sets of dice and it arrives in a box. And the dice are different kinds of dice, and sometimes they're sort of what you would expect, and sometimes they're new. Now, sometimes they are very, very, very different dice, or they're dice that haven't yet been released to the public, so you're kind of getting them beforehand. Now, there's a code here that you can get. I don't think the code is active. Oh, it's active until the 14th of March, so you've got a few days. It's 10% off. And that code is FebDS20. FebDS20. There you go. And you can get 10% off. Oh dear, 10% off for that. And of course, where you want to go to is Let me try that again. Criticalkit.co.uk. Criticalkit.co.uk. Let's see if I've got it up there. Yes, I do. Okay, so there you can see it. Kit.co.uk, and these are the kind of the dice that are inside. Now, some of these dice are quite spectacularly beautiful. What was interesting was I was chatting to the owner of this company and about dice and why do we collect dice? Why are we so obsessed with dice? What is it about dice? And he actually sold me a D16, which I realise now is way too far away for me to go and fetch. A D16, a 16-sided die. And you go, well, what the hell are you going to use a 16-sided die for? It's different. It's interesting. But, yeah, what would you use it for? And I thought, well, I've got dice from all over the place. There was that Kickstarter that we looked at last year, or just at the beginning of this year, where there was silver dice that cost a fortune. I have bone dice. I've got stone dice. There's lots of dice everywhere. So, yeah, we like collecting dice. So this is the perfect space. And he sent me two samples of dice. The first one are, I'm terribly sorry. The first one are these purple die. Now, you won't be able to see them. These are called dark crystal. And they do look like they're made out of amethyst. They've kind of got a translucency to them. You can see through them. But I also told him that I hate dice where you can't read the numbers. So these numbers are very, very, very obvious. And then he sent me this set of dice, which I wish you could see better. They look very sort of limey, but they're actually more yellow. And they've got these metal flecks inside of them, which makes them almost three-dimensional. I mean, they are three-dimensional, but it makes them look much more three-dimensional than they are. And then, of course, the plastic that they're in, the plastic is biodegradable. So it says it's made from composited certified film, so compostable. So you can put it in a compost heap, and one day it'll grow some more dice for you. So there you are. So that's criticalkit.co.uk. Very interesting website. Lots of very interesting dice on there. So go along, join them, and have a look. So I have to say, the XP Gamers, big thank you for that donation. Really do appreciate it. Your content has helped with my own GMing, running a Fantasy Flight Games Star Wars campaign well over a year. So thanks from me and my players, Captain Shack. Well, thank you very much for that feedback, Captain Shack. It is always, you know, we do these videos and we look at the content and we go, well, is this enough? Is this really what people want? And when we get comments like that, it's like, well, that's wonderful. That's really, really wonderful to hear that we are in some small shape or way helping to make this space a better space. So thank you for that, Captain Shack. I really do appreciate that. Right, now let's see. Shadow Assassin says, my brain just goes for pretty click-clack math rocks and makes it release dopamine. I do like dice. I must admit, I do like dice. I won't lie on that one. Now, more questions. Watcher 2417 or 2417 or 2417. How much material do you prepare when you create a new world, and how much effort is it? That's a good question, and I think that the best way to answer it is when I am starting a new campaign, which I'm now doing, I jump onto worldanvil.com, and it's not because they sponsor the channel. They are sponsors of the channel, but it's because I can store my stuff there and it doesn't get lost. So, for example, this afternoon, just before the stream, as a matter of fact, I wanted to remake a map of a certain world that I have played in before, and I have to use WonderDraft for that. WonderDraft is a great world-making program for world maps at the moment. And I was looking through my hard drives going, well, I know I had my original hand-drawn map saved somewhere, but I've moved from South Africa to Japan and from Japan to the UK, and the hard drives are all stacked over there. There's 3 of them right now that I can see, and I couldn't find that bloody thing. Then I decided, oh yes, I remember now. So I had actually put it onto World Anvil. So I went on over to World Anvil, and sure as nuts, there was the map. And I could access what the map name was called, and then I could search for that on my hard drives, and well, eventually I found it. So World Anvil puts it all together, which I quite like about that. So I go to World Anvil, and I start to look at it. Now, this particular campaign that I'm going to be running, it's about how the world has changed. And so what I'm going to be doing now is going to each of the areas, and particularly starting with the area that the player character is going to start in. So the other day I was walking in the park and I'm like, I want to start a campaign using a technique that a friend of mine, Michael Kessevan, used on me, which I had never experienced it before. And that is the technique of create your character as if they're 3 levels higher, or create your character at level 10. Okay, you create your character at level 10. Now create your character at level 3 as well. You create your character at level 3. Then the game starts with the level 10 characters. And it runs for maybe just a session. And at the end of the session, there is a catastrophe. There is something on an epic scale that goes horrifically wrong. And as it does that, you stop and you say, that is in 48 hours. 48 hours before then, however, or 48 days or 48 years, now get your character from level 3, and now we actually start what led up to that point. So it's a very, 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 very complex way of telling a story. There is a lot of risk involved in terms of your players have got meta knowledge, which they can't use, so you have to have good players. But you've also set up something for the end. And you need to make sure that that's how it's going to end. So it's very tricky, and it does rely quite heavily on your players playing along. Going, yeah, all right, well, he wanted us, he said it in that castle, so probably have to go in that castle. Even though we don't want to, we probably need to, because we think we're near the end of the campaign and we think we need to do a face-off against that. Now, a clever GM is going to have them go in the castle and have nothing happen at all, and then they have to go back to that castle later on, and they're kind of disarmed with that meta knowledge, and so they go in, and then they suddenly find that they're in the end game. So you can really manipulate it, but it's a wonderful technique that he showed me. I really want to use it. So I had this idea in the park, and I was like, okay, Well, in order to do that, I want to do this and I need to set up that. So, right. In terms of this particular campaign, I'm now going back to my old map. I'm recreating the old map so that I'm familiarizing myself with that world once again, so that I can quite easily talk about locations and worlds and whatever. And then I can, once I'm familiarized with that, then my next process is going to sit back and say, right, what happened? What was established as being the outcome? And now, what does the world look like from a political perspective? Because also I've been chatting to the players and I said, you know, I want to play a game where the characters have a huge amount of influence, like they had in the Windswift eventually. But in the Windswift, they were the puppets. I want the characters in my next game to be the masters, the ones pulling the strings, and to see how that unfolds, because I think that could be very, very exciting. So very long answer. That's the process for this particular campaign. But other campaigns might start off where it's like, oh, I've got this idea and then I want to go from there. But I won't prepare a huge amount. I have my nemesis. I have my big bad. And for that, I made an illustration. I made an image, which I shared up on Discord with some people on Discord who are in a certain channel. And they quite liked it. I do have a title for the next campaign. It's called the Shadowmark War. The Shadowmark War. And I think that took me a bit of time. It took me about a day to go, what should we call it? It's going to have this MacGuffin. It's going to have that. So yeah, that's kind of where I am. Christian Taylor says, I want to run a sailing campaign. How do I keep ships entertaining and relevant to the story? Christian Taylor, were you paid to ask that question? So look, a sailing campaign and how do you keep ships entertaining? You have two options. Yeah, you've got more, but I'm only going to give you two. One is get yourself a copy of the official Wizards of the Coast, the Ghosts of Saltmarsh expansion book, settings book, because it has rules on how to run ship combat. Or two, you can go and buy my book, which released on the 28th of February in PDF. Hard copy will be released by the end of this month. A hardcover, if you so choose, where I took what they presented in Ghosts of Saltmarsh, realized that it is not designed specifically for long-term naval campaigns, and wrote new rules for it. Completely new rules. Absolutely new rules we started from scratch. We said, no. How do we make ship stuff exciting and fun? And what we came up with so far seems to have been accepted as the right way to go in terms of running it within 5th edition and not breaking 5th edition and not having to force characters to become sailors and build characters that are specifically around those sort of things. So you can go and have a look for that. And that is, you can find that on my website, www.greatgamemaster.com. And it's called A Complete Guide to Nautical Campaigns. So I think that sits pretty well in what you're looking for. So yes, there we are. I suppose I should put a link up in the chat. So I'm going to do that very, very quickly. GreatGameMaster.com. There you are. We also released, by the way, even if you don't buy the book, you can head on over to the website anyway. We released 30 ship maps, battle maps. They're all to scale. So if you have a gigantic printer or you want to print it out over many A4s, there are gigantic battle maps to scale, except for the ships that are over 200 foot in length. Those we did change to a 10-foot scale per grid because it's simply too big. It's simply, you'd be printing out something that's in 1-inch grid size. It would be several meters in length. So we didn't think that was very practical. Anyway, you can go and get those maps free. We release them free. You can also go to dungeonfog.com and get those same maps free. There you can actually edit them if you so choose. You can manipulate, change colors, add more decks, change the furniture, change the walls, do whatever it is that you want to do with those maps. You can get them there. Although you will have to have a subscription to Dungeon Fog or a month access pass, which is one of their new things that they've added. Again, if you use the code GREATGM, you will get a discount. I'm not sure exactly what it is at the moment, but you will get a discount if you sign up for a subscription with them. And then you have 30 maps that you literally can edit to your heart's content. So there we are. Dracone says, what is the most interesting... Let me go back and find that question because I started it. What is the most interesting custom monster you've made for your campaigns? The most interesting. Well, the one that comes to me off the top of my head is the one that I did the other day. I have it here, as a matter of fact. Again, it's interesting. So one of the things that we're changing up on our Patreon is we want the Patreon to be useful. And in the past, we used to do an adventure and a map. So you got a map with a correlating adventure, and you could drop that adventure into any system. It was system agnostic, and then you could work with it. And then we did a video called a glass dragon, how to make a glass dragon, or why you need glass dragons. And that was really just us coming up with this idea. It was hugely successful. A lot of people created stats for this monster, and we went, well, yes, that is cool, but that's not exactly what I had in my mind. So this last month, the Patreons got this as their reward. This is the glass dragon cover. And not that page, and it contains the write-up. Oh, let's get that in there. It's got the stat blocks for the glass dragon itself, as per D&D 5th rules, and then it's actually got an adventure on the back, so you can have an adventure. And so the glass dragon I thought was a lot of fun, because it's a junior it's a lower tier dragon. So you have the high dragons, which are the chromatics and the silver and all that sort of thing, which are intelligent. Then you get one below that, which are the big dragons, but they're not as smart. So they're lesser than the white dragon. And this particular glass dragon, it doesn't have wings. It burrows through the sands of deserts, and it breathes molten glass. Now, we had some people telling us how molten glass works, so we have fixed that by saying that the saliva in the beast's mouth alters the nature of the glass. So it produces this desert glass. It encases its victims in glass, and it makes a little glass garden out of the statues. And then you'll see later on, if you read the rest of the adventure, what it does with those statues. And those statues are traps. So that's quite fun. So they sort of make these little glass statues and decorate the desert with these glass statues. So we thought that was fun because it adds a whole bunch of sort of psychological terror to the whole thing. And there have been lots of dragons that have been added to 5th edition. The shadow dragon was quite fun. I saw an Elithid dragon that had been added. So there's lots of different options. But anyway, I mean, that was just something that we did. Grizzles asks, has there been any news on another run of the Game of Many Players? That game is run on our Discord. It's for 100 players to play at the same time. I beg your pardon. And there hasn't been any more news on that. I updated the PDF for the guys the other day. The other day being last year, December, I suppose. We can ask them on our Discord server. Join us on our Discord server. That's discord.gg/GreatGM. You can come and ask them. So there we are. All right. Lots of questions still. I'm going to come back to some of these questions. Again, talking about what I saw at Bristol. And this is what I like about conventions, is that you can go to a convention and you can go and play your games, and my game was absolutely amazing. I had a player who had never played Dungeons and Dragons before, who was new to role-playing as in only the last couple months, and they broke my adventure within the first 10 minutes. Completely broke it, as in destroyed it. And I have never had this happen in a Dungeons and Dragons, or any role-playing game for that matter, in my entire career. It was absolutely wonderful, and it's the reason why I like playing with people who have no role-playing experience, because they think out of the box. Or in this case, it's not even thinking out of the box. It's what we do on a fairly regular basis. Anyway, I'll come to that story. Remind me in a little bit. Something else that I met, and this is also what I love doing, is I met a bunch of people who had released their own role-playing book. And they gave me a hard copy of it. It's a lovely little book called Troika. Now, Troika It is released by a company called Melsonian Arts Council, the Melsonian Arts Council. But it is, in fact, their website is www.melsonia.com. Melsonia.com. I'll put it in the chat. So this is an RPG that they have written. It's a science fantasy, which I quite like. So there's a magic system in it. Oh, there goes a card. There's a magic system in it. There's some lovely random spell tables and magic weapons and chances to hit and that sort of thing, which is quite nice. And then it's got these very, very, very endearing illustrations in them. There's a surreal quality to them. They're quite different from what you normally see. So I've picked up this. I haven't read it yet. I haven't had time to read it. It just happened at exactly the wrong time. But it does look super cool. I mean, it really does. It's very atmospheric. And so I like to meet these kinds of people and to get these kinds of books. Now, something that they did do, which I particularly like, and I don't think you're going to see it on the stream. Maybe you can see it. Okay, you can sort of see it. Do you notice how the pages seem as if they change colour? That's because they do. And what they've done is they've said, okay, well, characters are all in yellow. The rule system is in green. The purple section is for spells. So you can quite quickly thumb through this, which I particularly like. So melsonia.com, go and check them out if you want to have or get a copy of Troika. And they've done a whole bunch of other stuff. One of the other things that they did was they'd written this book on plants, and it was just weird and wonderful plants. It was really, 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 really cool. And so there were no rules in it, but you could give this or buy this for yourself if you play a druid or someone who uses herbalism, to just sit there and randomly open a page and say, oh, this root looks very similar to Doadonna hebialis, which is a slightly purple root and can be used for making sure wounds don't go septic. No mechanical value, just a lot of fun. So yes, Troika basically means three things. I think it's a Greek word, meaning the three, combining of the three together. So there we are. Right. What else was I going to say? I'm going to go back to questions while my brain thinks about that. So let's get your questions coming in. XX Valentine XX says, when should I use battle maps over theatre of the mind in combat? That's a good question. I would use battle maps when you have a set piece, when you have something that is visually engaging, when you created a good battle map. So if it's something that's exciting, if it's the big showdown, if it's something of an important nature, I would use battle maps. But having said that, if you have created a whole bunch of battle maps and you've got field battle map and road battle map, why not use it when you go into combat? Again, it's also about making sure that your players want to use it. Some players don't like battle maps, others do. And when they do, then it's useful to have them on hand. So getting a subscription or a month contract or whatever with Dungeon Fog and making road map, street map, swamp map, and you can get a lot of those for free from the Dungeon Fog website anyway. People share their maps and they make all these kind of maps and things. And then just having them on hand is really, really, really useful. Now, if you're playing online, if you're playing in Fantasy Grounds or Roll20 or any of the other ones that are out there, it becomes very important to have access to those. So then having a lot of generic ones that you can kind of just throw in and say, well, there we are, it's next to the river, or there's a little road and whatever, becomes important because that's how people will visualize. So that's definitely something to think about. Right. Then Infrequent Game Master says, are there perhaps ways of making magic not feel so mundane, aside from low magic campaigns? That's about your world setting. So if your world treats magic as mundane, everyone's level 3 wizard, we have wizard college, we've got wizard stuff, we've got priest stuff, that makes it mundane. Now, obviously, if you don't want to have a low magic world, where, yes, then it is also. So what I then quite liked was when Magic the Gathering was still in its infancy in the 1990s and the early 2000s. They released a series of novels where they tried to work out the world in which this magic was taking place. Now, this was before they kind of had all of their theme worlds and that sort of thing. So they had instead these sorcerers who would have bags, a little satchel, and in the satchel was a little bundle of earth or ground, or it was something reminiscent of mana, which you use within the actual card game itself, and they would draw power from that mana. Almost anyone could draw power, so magic was, I wouldn't say hugely common, but it was available. What made it spectacular were these gigantic arenas where these mages would get together and throw magic against each other using their magic spells, basically a realization of the card game. So if you want magic to be special in your world, you need to make it special. And how do you make it special? By having the NPCs make it special. So if an NPC kind of goes, oh yeah, you're a mage, are you? Oh yeah, oh, that's fine. You're a paladin, you're a fighter, I don't care. But when the mage walks in, oh, you're a mage, are you? Oh, do you compete in the national tournaments? What's your champion ranking? Can you cast this? Can you do that? A healer walks into an inn. You're a healer. Please, my daughter's sick. Please, I give you free accommodation if you just heal my daughter. You can make it feel as if it's got more importance by having the people in your world give it more importance. And often we forget to do that. So that's the long and short of it. The person who broke my campaign story, I see a couple of people asking for that. So the basic premise, and if you happen to be at Gen Con this year and Gen Con happens to approve what I want to do there, you'll be able to play this particular adventure. So if you are going to be at Gen Con and you think you might be involved in one of these games, take your headphones off or stop listening or whatever it is you're going to do, and I'll give you a big thumbs up when it's ready to come back. I'll let you do that while I pick up what I dropped on the floor. Okay, so I beg your pardon. The entire idea of the adventure is the characters right at the beginning of the adventure. They have a sailing ship. That's how it fits, right? And they are the captain and masters of this particular vessel, except that they have run out of money. And they know that at the end of the month they have to come up with 300 gold pieces, or 600 gold pieces actually, to pay their crew their salary. So they're a bit desperate. They've got 80 gold between them. And a shady character comes up to them and says, I will pay you 5,000 gold, which for a captain is not a huge amount of money, but it's enough to get them going for a while. I will pay you 5,000 gold if you'll take your ship to these coordinates tomorrow, get there by noon, and remain for at least 1 hour, whereupon you can go wherever you like. If you return here to port, I'll pay you your money. If you sail on, that's your business. And as a sign of good faith, here is 2,000 gold pieces right up front. That's all that they need to do. And the coordinates are 6 hours sailing out of port into basically the middle of nowhere. That's all they need to do. Sail out to the middle of nowhere, wait for an hour, and then sail back. The other characters that I have run this game with were dubious of the character. They thought they were going to go and get hijacked or something along those lines, but they couldn't work out why specific coordinates. Then they thought maybe they're going to get eaten by a monster as some kind of sacrifice. Nonetheless, they went off and they did it. This particular group, the captain was the person who had the least amount of role-playing experience, and he went, oh, yeah, we'll take the job. Absolutely, we'll take the job. The shady character disappeared, and the captain immediately then said, right, well, he's going to pay us 5,000 gold, so let's go and hire another ship's captain and crew. We'll pay them 1,000 gold, and they can go to the strange location and come back. What's the difference? We've just outsourced the adventure to NPCs, so the GM can go play with himself, and we're going to carry on trying to figure out what to do with our winnings. It would normally have broken the entire scenario. I mean, it's wonderful. It was wonderful thinking. It's like outsourcing. Yes, of course it makes sense. If we don't want to go into the dungeon, we'll just outsource it to somebody else who will. Why not? It does fly in the face of traditional sort of role-playing, absolutely. And perhaps if this wasn't a fixed set piece, I would have let them do that and run with the ramifications of what happened as a result. But because it was a set piece, because I wanted them to experience this story, right, well, How do we fix that? How do we fix that where they want to outsource this thing? So the easiest solution, of course, is when the shady character came back to pay them their 2,000 gold. He went, right, so what's the name of your ship? Because I'll be coming with you. And as a result, then they couldn't outsource it because, well, he was going to go with them. And if they had outsourced it at that point, he would have just paid the new captain and off he goes. So there you are. Yeah. Now, I loved that because it got me to think, it got me to go, whoa, hang on a moment. How do we overcome this? And it was a lot of fun. It really was a lot of fun. And then they went, of course, on the adventure, and then they started to see all of the wonderful plots and things unfolding. And they did have a lot of fun. All right, we've got 4 minutes left. 4 minutes left. There were many other wonderful things that I met and saw at the Bristol convention. There were some lovely things going on there. So if you can get to conventions, go to them. Support your local convention hall, your local gaming association, and chat and talk and just answer and ask questions. That's what I particularly like. How does your system work? What's different? You know, it's add it on later on. So as Frederick Schmidt says, you should always be nervous when you are running a game, even after 20 years of GMing. Absolutely, absolutely. If you're not nervous, if you're bored, then why are you doing it? Why are you doing it? Let's do some last questions. And I see Scar75 says, how would you go about populating a hex crawl with encounters and quests? Well, as we were doing yesterday when we were drawing a map and figuring out, we didn't get that far, but we will in the next stream on next Saturday. It's about creating locations that have some kind of meaning. They don't have to have a fixed meaning. They can have sort of any old meaning because you have no idea where the characters are going. So they could go in any direction. So if you have a hex and it's just plains, okay, sure. If the next hex after the plains is this weird statue that you put into that hex, you don't have to know what that statue is. You really don't have to plan for it whatsoever. Because if you did that, you'd be planning for every single hex and you'd go mad. What you do, however, is, let's say you've got 3 or 4 adventures that you've prepared, where you've prepared your battle maps, you've got all of your notes sitting on World Anvil. It's all just ready and waiting, but you don't know which one the players are going to go to. So they decide to go to hex number 53, which is a blank hex. Do you panic? Do you worry? No, you don't, because you go, well, I've got an adventure that's planned for a nondescript location. The hex says it's nondescript. But as a matter of fact, as you're walking along, the ground caves in and there's a cave. And so here's my cave adventure, which I have prepared beforehand. So you can do something like that. Next question, and it might very well be the last question for the day. Angus Boy says, I've come up with some supplementary rules for the system I'm using that may be contradictory. So I wanted to know what your opinion on system hacks versus system creation. My book, A Complete Guide to Nautical Campaigns, it completely rewrites the movement rules of Dungeons and Dragons because ships don't work when you are plotting them on a 5-foot grid. They just don't work. The system was never designed for that. So it says, okay, that's what you use when you're using this scale of combat. Once you start getting to this scale of combat, then you have to use this system. So I don't have a problem with it if it makes the game fun, if it makes it better. So I don't know. I saw Game Master's Vault was in here. He was my developmental editor for Complete Guide to Nautical Campaigns, and we tweaked and we said, okay, well, if you sail this fast and if you're moving this fast and if you've got that, and we've just spent half an hour working on how much a ship moves in and around. That's so boring. We're taking that out. We're just going to take that out. We're going to write a new system. We're going to have a new system in there, and that's exactly what we did. And so there we go. That is exactly what we did. Christian Poulsen says, have you ever thought about reworking D&D spellcasting? If so, how would you do it? I have thought about it, and I realized that what it would result in is effectively a completely new D20 system. I love D20 as a base. I love a D20 die and all of the additional dice that go with it. But if you recreate the magic system, you have to start from scratch. You really do. And there are lots of ways of doing it, but does it mean that you're still playing Dungeons and Dragons? That's the real question that you have to answer. Shadows Assassin says, prepping for descent into Avernus, watched your mini campaign for inspiration. Is there any way we could access the maps, particularly Knucklebone and the War Machine, or were they done purely for the campaign? So they were done on Dungeon Fog. They absolutely were done on Dungeon Fog. The War Machine and Fort Knucklebone were designed by us, I suppose. They're not controlled or owned by Wizards of the Coast whatsoever, but they were designed for the stream. So as a result, they stay on the stream. I can send them a letter and see if they respond and see if they let us release them publicly. I don't have an issue with that, but you would have to have a Dungeon Fog subscription in order to be able to edit them, and not have them have watermark all over the place. So there is that to bear in mind. And then the last question that I will take, because we are just over time, Brix says, where in South Africa would you recommend buying Dungeons and Dragons books and dice? Brix, it does depend on where you are, and bearing in mind I was last in South Africa on that perspective 3 years ago, basically. I do know you can get to the Nexus. If you look for Nexus Johannesburg, there is a store called the Nexus run by Grant Charlton and company. They will definitely be selling those kinds of things. I think there's still a Wizard store in Cavendish Square in Cape Town, and in Durban, I don't know. I really don't know. So yeah, I would have a look at that. So where do we get our Patreon stuff at? That would be patreon.com/greatgamemaster. I think that's what it is. Great Game Master, patreon.com, Great Game Master, and you can grab a whole bunch of stuff there, like podcasts and all kinds of other cool things. Until we meet again next week, however, that's the end of the show. On Twitch, we are going to launch a raid, he said, realizing that he wasn't in the right panel thingy. So I'm going to do a raid. We're going to jump in on the World Anvil show. So I will start that raid. Let the Horde invade World Anvil, where they're talking about map making and geography. I know Kaora is on that. So there we go. Mega Mawili, thank you for that statement. I really do appreciate it. Of course, until the next time we see you all, goodbye Twitch. Here goes the raid. Ba-boom. And for those of you left on Twitch or on YouTube, thanks for watching, and I will be back again next Sunday. So until then, happy gaming.